On a grey Saturday in Boston, when the harbour wore a calm silver, and the air smelled like salt and snow deciding its schedule, Daniel Brooks walked out of the community center pool with his towel over his shoulder, and the kind of quiet that lingers after water. He had started swimming 3 months earlier, because grief asks for motion, because lanes offer borders when the rest of life goes blurry. He was 34, an urban planner who fought for bike lanes and bus shelters and sidewalks that respected elders. He liked maps and humble victories. He liked neighborhoods that remembered names. The pool at the Charlestown Community Center was old but clean. Its tiles held decades of laughter, and most of the rules were about kindness. Share lanes, count to 3 before pushing off. Bring your tired and we will meet it. Most mornings a small crew of regulars showed up with their own rituals. An attorney who swam like he argued. A nurse who swam like a lullaby. A retiree named Mr. Callahan who believed flip turns could save marriages. And then there was her. Her name was Harper Quinn. She ran the center's adaptive swim program in the afternoons and the morning lap hours when needed. She had a voice that could quiet a room without scolding, and a whistle she hardly used. Her hair was the color of dry leaves and always tied back. Her eyes did that Boston thing of being kind and skeptical at the same time. Daniel had spoken to her 3 or 4 times. Hello and good morning, and can you remind me how to not drown when I think about emails? She had laughed at that and shown him a drill with a kickboard and a sense of humor. He swam his laps slowly and steadily, trying to learn the patience of water, pausing at the wall to count breaths, watching how Harper encouraged the nervous teenager to trust his own arms. How she listened to a grandmother speak about stiff shoulders, as if shoulders have opinions. How she got down on the wet deck to be closer to a 6-year-old whose world had been loud, and now was finally a little soft. On this Saturday, the clouds had decided to rehearse all the weather at once. The pool windows fogged and cleared like people learning to breathe. Daniel finished his last set and climbed the ladder. The water let him go reluctantly. He wrapped the towel around his shoulders and began his ritual. Bottle, sneakers, list and head of groceries. Phone call to his sister Anna in Toronto. He would ask about her journalism job and whether the city had been good to her this week. He glanced toward the far end and saw Harper kneeling beside a boy named Luca, who used a bright blue flotation belt and a brave voice. Luca's mother stood nearby with hands clasped. Harper said, "You are the boss of your breath, not the other way around. Can we try 1 count longer?" Luca nodded and did. The water held him up like a promise kept. His mother cried once, quickly, then smiled like a lighthouse. Daniel looked away, because sometimes the right respect is to pretend you are not witnessing greatness. He put on his sweatshirt and slid his feet into socks that remembered a dryer sheet. He picked up his towel and started for the door. He had promised himself he would make oatmeal, finish the grant application for safer crossings near the school, drop off a book at the library, ordinary Saturday heroics that keep people from falling apart. Then Harper called his name, not loud, just as if it had always lived in her mouth. Daniel, and he turned, surprised to be claimed by sound. She stood by the guard chair with a clipboard, and a smile that made the room a little warmer. She said, "Do you have a minute? I know it is Saturday and you probably have a city to repair." He said, "I have 10 minutes and a city that can wait for 11 if needed." She laughed softly and motioned to the bleachers. They sat with wet air and the echo of morning. She said, "This is going to sound like a small thing, but small things have been running my life lately. I have a parent meeting in an hour for the adaptive program. Some of the families have concerns about the new schedule. The city adjusted our lane allotments again. I could use someone who understands maps and moods. Someone neutral. Would you listen and help me sketch a better layout?" Daniel said yes even before his civics brain did the math. Because she asked, and because helping keeps a person from disappearing. He said, "I can stay an hour, 2 if we bribe me with vending machine coffee." She said we have better coffee in the staff room. I will trade you a cinnamon bagel for your pencil. He said deal and felt the morning align itself with a click. In the small staff room with a crooked inspirational poster that read teamwork in a font more hopeful than practical, Harper made coffee in a dented French press and sliced a bagel. She handed him a legal pad and a broken pencil. Sorry. The good pencils walk away. He sharpened it with a pocket sharpener he carried, because his father taught him to keep small tools and small kindnesses close. Harper noticed and said, "You are dangerous in a good way." He said, "I take compliments like vitamins." "Thank you." She spread a calendar on the table. Blocks of color, notes about therapists and school buses, and the therapy dog named Captain who visited once a week. Daniel asked questions quietly. How many families need the shallow end at 3? Who needs the chairlift at 4? What days do your volunteers vanish because life? Harper drew little fish symbols for each child on a sticky note and moved them like a gentle general. She said, "I want every kid to feel like the pool belongs to them for the hour they are here. I want parents to sit and exhale. I want lanes to be less about fences and more about invitations." Daniel loved how she spoke about water like it was a language, and everyone deserved fluency. He drew rectangles and arrows. He proposed a rotational system that would give more time to the kids who needed calm transitions. He suggested pairing new families with veteran parents for the first 2 sessions. A buddy bench, but for the bleachers. Harper's eyes brightened as if a window had opened. She said yes, that. Also a quiet corner with headphones and a beanbag. We can call it the listening chair. He said, "You just invented a new building code for kindness." She said, "You just invented a way to make it fit into our hours and lanes." The parent meeting came and was not a meeting so much as a family reunion with fear in the corner. Harper spoke with clarity and care. She introduced Daniel as our planning friend, who knows how to make things fair without turning anyone into a spreadsheet. Parents nodded and tried smiles on. Questions came. What if my son panics when the whistle blows? What if my daughter needs the lift? 2 times, not 1. What if the locker room gets too loud and we have to go home? Harper answered honestly. The answer was usually yes, we can try that. Yes, we can practice. Yes, we can hold space and not apologize. Daniel offered the schedule map like a friendly map. Not a threat. People relaxed. Some scribbled notes. Some exhaled as if they had been holding their breath since kindergarten. After the meeting, a father in a Red Sox cap shook Daniel's hand and said, "Thanks for treating us like citizens and not problems." Daniel swallowed and said, "You are citizens. You are also the reason public spaces deserve the word public." The father nodded as if he had been waiting to be seen as a noun and not an issue. Harper stood beside Daniel as the room emptied. Her shoulder brushed his and he felt the kind of electricity that is less about thunder and more about lamps coming on. She said, "You are very good at your job of being a person." He said, "I learned from watching you do yours." She rolled her eyes to disarm the compliment and then let it land anyway. By the time the afternoon adaptive swims began, Daniel had decided to stay and help with whatever Harper needed. He held towels like a martyrdom of warmth. He wiped puddles. He adjusted lane lines. He counted breaths with Luca and celebrated when 5 became 6. He watched Harper like a student, how she crouched to eye level to show respect, how she named fears without turning them into monsters, how she said yes more than no, and said no only when safety insisted. Around 4 the snow finally began outside. Flakes that tried on the idea and then committed. The windows blurred into white. Daniel considered his bus route and decided that walks were better anyway. Harper offered him an extra center hoodie, and he put it on and felt it choose him. At the end of the shift, the center grew quiet except for the drip-drip language of pools. Harper locked the gates and turned off half the lights. The water held the day's stories and did not spill them. Daniel slung his towel over his shoulder and followed. Harper to the lobby where a mural of neighborhood faces watched with patient love. He said I should go. The city can only make oatmeal without me for so long. He smiled to soften the goodbye. He reached for the door. His towel slid and he adjusted it. The glass reflected two people who had spent a day earning tired in the good way. Then she said the sentence he would never forget. She said, "Please do not leave yet. I have not told you what you just did for me." Her voice was not dramatic. It was steady and a little choked, like a river that had swum through rocks and wanted to keep talking. Daniel let the door close. The click sounded like a comma and not a period. He turned back, towel in his hands, heart doing that unruly thing it does when days decide to be more than days. Harper leaned against the front desk and folded her arms as if to keep herself from reaching for. This time it was not about help or thanks. It was about a future. She said, "Please do not leave yet. I have one more schedule I want to draw with you. Not on paper. In our lives, if you want. We could move some lanes around. Give each other mornings and evenings. Write in a Tuesday that belongs to us. A Saturday that remembers to rest. We could double our coffee budget and share it. We could be a we. If that is what you are already carrying and just waiting for me to say." He stopped and turned and set the towel down as if towels deserve ceremony sometimes. He walked back to the bench. He sat. He said, "I am carrying that. Yes. I think I have been building a life that wants a you in it. Not as a guest, as a co-owner." He smiled because he did not know how to be smooth. She smiled because smooth was never on the checklist. They decided to call what they had made a relationship. They told May and Anna and Mr. Callahan, who took credit because he is Mr. Callahan. They told Captain, who wagged as if he had been in on it from the first whistle. Autumn came and the city put on its serious coat. They kept going. They argued once about bleach and once about boundaries with a parent who called at midnight. They apologized and repaired and learned to send each other to nap when needed. They bought a second-hand couch for Daniel's apartment and a plant that tried to die and then chose to live. They learned each other's family recipes. His mother's pierogies, May's stew. They watched hockey with half attention and cheered for any team that made teamwork look like tenderness. In December, they hosted a holiday open swim. Lights strung carefully, music low, cocoa warm. Harper stood on the deck and read a poem about water remembering. Daniel walked the perimeter and said hello to every person like a census of belonging. After closing, he found Harper crying quietly in the staff room. She said, "I miss my brother most on days like this." He sat with her and did not tell her to feel differently. He said his name is still in the room. She nodded and said, "I know. Thank you for saying it out loud." They put a candle on the window ledge and watched it flicker and felt it not fix anything and still help. New Year's Eve, they closed at 6 and walked to the harbor and watched the early fireworks for children and adults who prefer to sleep. They held hands like people who have practiced and are still surprised at the ease. They made 3 resolutions: more rest, more invitations, more soup. They kept 2 and forgave themselves the 3rd, and tried again in February. In March, a grant they had written together came through. Money for more headphones and a new lift and a bigger staff room that would hold an extra chair for days when feelings had to sit down. They danced a silly dance in the lobby, and the janitor applauded. They pinned the grant letter to the whiteboard under "We Keep Going" and wrote, "See also the part where we ask and the universe says yes" in a whisper. In April, Daniel proposed a neighborhood street redesign with raised crosswalks shaped gently like waves. He thanked the pool in his presentation without naming it, because not all inspirations want plaques. The council approved Phase 1. He went back to the center and told Harper, and she kissed him in the hallway, between the drinking fountain and the poster about sunscreen. A place that felt appropriately municipal. They laughed until the echo joined the laughter and made it a choir. In June, they traveled to New Hampshire to the lake cottage from Harper's Stories. May came. Anna came. They swam from the dock to the buoy and back. The water was cold and righteous. Harper stood on the shore and taught Daniel to breathe in threes and laugh in fives. He said, "Teach me every year." She said, "Every year." And they promised to try, that summer, on a Sunday evening with air warm like an apology for February. Daniel stood in the lobby again, towel over his shoulder after a last lap. Harper behind the desk balancing the schedule and a cup of tea. He reached for the door and paused. She looked up with that now familiar smile. And he said it first this time, "Please do not leave yet. Not this life, not this room we built." She walked around the desk and took his hand and said, "I am not leaving. Not yet. Not ever if we can help it." The door opened on its own from a breeze. The city breathed, they stepped out into it, together. Ordinary and extraordinary at once. Years later, when people asked how they began, Daniel would say, "I grabbed my towel to leave." And Harper said something I will never forget. And Harper would say he stayed. That is the whole story we keep telling with new chapters every season. And the pool would still smell like courage. And the whiteboard would still say, "We keep going." And the city would still be learning to be kind. And they would still be there, holding towels and hands and maps and mornings, grateful every day for a sentence that turned a door into a doorway and a day into a life. They thanked the harbor for teaching patience, they thanked the pool for teaching breath, they thanked the neighbors for teaching how to show up, they promised to keep soup ready before storms, to keep spare goggles by the door, to keep writing small notes that say keep going, to keep walking home together on stubborn nights, to keep calling love a practice and kindness a policy. They thanked the harbor for teaching patience, they thanked the pool for teaching breath, they thanked the neighbors for teaching how to show up, they promised to keep soup ready before storms, to keep spare goggles by the door, to keep writing small notes that say keep going, to keep walking home together on stubborn nights, to keep calling love a practice and kindness a policy. They thanked the harbor for teaching patience, they thanked the pool for teaching breath, they thanked the neighbors for teaching how to show up, they promised to keep soup ready before storms, to keep spare goggles by the door, to keep writing small notes that say keep going, to keep walking home together on stubborn nights, to keep calling love a practice and kindness a policy. They thanked the harbor for teaching patience, they thanked the pool for teaching breath, they thanked the neighbors for teaching how to show up, they promised to keep soup ready before storms, to keep spare goggles by the door, to keep writing small notes that say keep going, to keep walking home together on stubborn nights, to keep calling love a practice and kindness a policy. They thanked the harbor for teaching patience, they thanked the pool for teaching breath, they thanked the neighbors for teaching how to show up, they promised to keep soup ready before storms, to keep spare goggles by the door, to keep writing small notes that say keep going, to keep walking home or away from something. She said, "When I was 20, I thought I would become a physical therapist and open a clinic with my brother. He was a swimmer, a good one. He taught me how to breathe in threes and how to laugh in fives. He died in a car accident on a February road that thought it was invincible. I quit school for a while and then found this pool, this job, these families. I learned to build a life where water and grief could share a lane. Today you walked in with your towel and your maps and made this place feel bigger than the city budget and my courage. You made it possible for me to imagine asking for help again, without feeling like failure. So please do not leave yet, not forever anyway. Not tonight before I say thank you properly." Daniel's throat burned the way salt water can if you forget to turn your face. He said, "I am here." He said it like a promise to the building as well as to her. She smiled. Some hardness in her shoulders softened. The lobby light made a small halo on the floor that had nothing to do with religion, and everything to do with relief. They sat on the bench in the front hall, and shared the last half of the bagel like a sacrament. Harper told him more about her brother, about the lake cottage in New Hampshire, where they raced each other, and pretended lily pads were stepping stones to adulthood, about the way grief had rearranged furniture in her chest, and how she was learning the new floor plan. Daniel told her about his father, an electrician who could fix a porch light, and a mood in the same visit. About the night the heart attack came without an invitation, about how swimming quieted the echoes, about how his sister Anna called from Toronto and made him drink water through the phone. Snow leaned against the glass like a friend staying over. The city slowed. The center smelled like clean and cinnamon, and the faint ghost of chlorine. Harper asked if he would like to volunteer officially. Background check. T-shirt that fits a little badly, a schedule. He said yes immediately, and then said, "I will be better at leaving when you ask me to than when you do not." She laughed, the kind of laugh that puts a coat on a shiver. She said, "Fair. I will practice asking, and you will practice trusting that I mean it." Over the next weeks, Daniel became the sort of person who knows where the extra goggles live, and how to tell when a child's brave is almost out of gas. He learned to rinse kickboards and to sing under his breath with Captain the therapy dog, who took his job as seriously as a nap. Harper and he built the schedule together, moving fish sticky notes and adding a new one every time a family called because their kid had heard rumors that water can be kind. They developed small rituals, tea in the staff room where they traded lists of tiny victories. Miss Florey's daughter did 2 back floats today. Mr. Callahan apologized to the lane line for kicking it. The new volunteer learned the difference between encouragement and cheering. They wrote these things on a whiteboard titled "We Keep Going." They wiped the board when it grew crowded and began again because the point was not to make a museum. The point was to keep. Daniel's work at the city continued. He fought for a curb cut near a pharmacy. He presented at a council meeting where a man in a suit rolled his eyes. He held his ground. He did not raise his voice. He carried the sound of Harper's voice into the room, as a reminder that he was not alone. He brought a template of the pool schedule to his team, and said we could learn from this. We could design our streets the way a good program designs its hours, with attention to transition and noise and courage. His team laughed, and then stopped laughing, and then listened. In late February, an ice storm came and turned sidewalks into sly jokes. The center opened late. Families arrived in boots with Velcro and hope. Harper texted Daniel at 6 in the morning. "Can you be here by 8? He answered with a mitten emoji and showed up at 7:30 because he liked being early for things that deserved it. They shoveled the ramp together and salted it like a cook who hates blandness. They held the door for elders and toddlers and everyone in between. They made cocoa for parents and called it staff training. They made it through the day with only one slip and no panic. At closing, Harper stood by the door and looked at him with tired gratitude that made him shy. She said the sentence again in a different key. "Please do not leave yet. Let me learn how to lean a little." He stayed and he leaned too, because leaning is better when it is mutual. Spring arrived with a shrug. The Charles learned its own music again. Ducks decided governance was simple. The pool smelled less like winter jackets and more like towels that will dry on the porch. Harper introduced a new Saturday program, open swims for siblings. Daniel worried about chaos and then watched it turn into community. Siblings showed up with big feelings and snacks and the kind of energy that could power a small town. Harper orchestrated it like a symphony, but without the snobbery. She gave Daniel the job of reading stories on the bleachers to anyone who needed a quiet island. He did voices so seriously that teenagers rolled their eyes but did not leave. They started walking after closing to a bakery on Main Street that sold bread with names like Hope and Enough. They split a loaf and sat on the curb and talked about nothing and everything. About city budgets and favorite teachers. and whether you can ever teach patience or only model it. About a summer road trip neither had time for and might make time for anyway. They told each other what they were afraid of and what they wanted. And they wrote some of it down, and some of it they held between them like a shared umbrella. On a windy May afternoon, Harper introduced Daniel to her mother, May Quinn, a nurse with a firm handshake and a talent for making bandages look like modern art. May told him stories about Harper as a kid. The one where she organized a lane marker protest in their backyard kiddie pool. The one where she learned to whistle and used it to time neighborhood races. Daniel went red and Harper went mock stern. And May laughed until her tea did that dangerous thing tea does when it feels neglected. May turned to June, and the city practiced being kind with sunshine. The center hosted a fundraiser with a swimmer yawn. Daniel swam for an hour in a lane with Mr. Callahan, who talked the entire time and still beat him. Harper walked the deck with a microphone and told the story of North Shore, families who drive in because no one else holds the water with this much gentleness. She thanked donors with sincerity and a bad joke. And people gave more because they trusted the jokes. Daniel was in awe again and did not try to hide it. He liked that awe felt ordinary now. Like a kitchen light you turn on every morning, familiar and still miraculous. At the end of the night they counted pledges in the staff room. Harper put her head on the table for a minute and said, "I am allowed to collapse briefly." Daniel put a folded towel under her cheek. He set a timer for 3 minutes. She slept exactly 3 minutes and woke up and said thank you. He said, "Please do not leave yet. We have to deposit this." She smiled and opened her eyes, and the room felt like a poem that had just found its last line. Summer finally arrived fully, with kids who smelled like sunscreen and courage. With parents who learned to stop apologizing for their children's joy. With teens who lifeguarded like they were learning how to be both strict and kind. Daniel and Harper fell into a routine that looked like partnership even before they named it. They texted during the day about broken clocks and found goggles, and later sent each other photos of the sky at sunset from opposite sides of the neighborhood. They made playlists to clean the locker rooms faster. They organized a shelf labeled Lost and Found and Kept. The kept items were the compliments and the first floats and the days nobody cried. Through it all the sentence Harper had said lived in Daniel's chest. "Please do not leave yet." It became a kind of compass. When he wanted to retreat into his own quiet, he remembered it as an invitation. A way to stay for one more conversation, one more laugh, one more small fix that made the day easier for someone else. He began to hear echoes of it from the city. "Please do not leave yet, we are not finished getting better." And he stayed. In July, Anna visited from Toronto. She came to the pool and met Harper and May and Captain the dog and Mr. Callahan, who tried to teach her a flip turn in the lobby. Anna watched Daniel and Harper laugh over a broken lane reel. And later she said to Daniel on a walk by the harbor, "I like her. She looks at you like you are a person and not a project." He said, "I like her for many reasons, that might be the biggest." Anna nodded and said, "Do not be brave alone." He said, "I will not. I promise." August brought heat and a broken air conditioning unit that required ingenuity and popsicles. Harper and Daniel ran fans and wrote apology notes and made a game where every child who said, "I am too hot," received a sticker shaped like a snowflake and a spray bottle mist to the face. Tears turned into giggles. Parents wrote thank you emails that sounded like love letters to municipal systems. Daniel saved them in a folder called Proof That Public Works Is Love. On the last Saturday of August, almost a year since the first towel moment. They closed early for maintenance. The center was quiet. Daniel grabbed his towel to leave because he had promised to meet Anna for dinner, and because habits still live in bodies. He walked toward the door, and Harper said the sentence a third time.